I'm 94 years old. I'm lying in a quiet room that smells faintly like antiseptic and old paper. And outside the window there's a pale winter sun hanging over a sky the color of washed denim. The nurse told me it's 3:17 p.m. But time doesn't feel like numbers anymore. It feels like something that slipped through my hands while I was busy checking emails, paying mortgages, attending meetings that no one remembers. And if you're watching this right now, I need you to hear me before it's too late. For most of my life, I believed the same comforting lie you probably believe. I thought I had time to rest later, time to travel later, time to call my brother back later, time to sit on the porch and watch the sun dip behind the maple trees in our backyard somewhere in suburban Ohio. I kept telling myself, after this promotion, after the kids graduate, after the house is paid off. That word after became the most dangerous word in my life. Because after quietly turns into never. I built what the world told me was a good life, a respectable career, a 400 square foot house with a 2-car garage, retirement accounts that looked impressive on paper. I measured success in square footage and salary brackets, and every morning at 6:30 a.m. my alarm would ring, and I would move through my day on autopilot, convinced that this rhythm was responsible adulthood. I didn't realize I was slowly becoming absent from my own life. There's something nobody tells you about living on autopilot. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels normal. It feels productive. It feels safe. And that's why it's so dangerous. You don't wake up one day screaming that you've wasted your life. You wake up decades later wondering where it went. Now, lying here with less than a handful of sunsets left, I can see the pattern clearly. The illusion of I'll start living later. The trade I made presence for productivity. Connection for achievement. Today for someday. And I would give every dollar I ever earned just to sit one more evening at the dinner table without rushing to check my phone. If you think this is just another deathbed regret story, stay with me, because this isn't about fear. It's about something far more unsettling. It's about the quiet way your life disappears while you're planning to live it. And I didn't understand that until the clock started running out. The most expensive lie I ever believed wasn't about money. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about success. It was the quiet, reasonable, socially approved lie that whispered, "There's still time." You hear it in your 20s when you skip the trip because you're building your career. You hear it in your 30s when you miss dinner because you're providing for your family. You hear it in your 40s when your doctor tells you to slow down and you laugh it off because you feel fine. There's still time. That sentence sounds harmless, responsible, even, but it cost me moments I can never buy back. I remember one Thursday night. It must have been 1987. I was 55 years old, sitting in my office under fluorescent lights that hummed louder than my own thoughts. My son had a high school baseball game. I promised I'd be there, but a client meeting ran long. Then another call came in. I looked at the clock, 8:42 p.m. I told myself, he'll have plenty more games. I'll catch the next one. There wasn't a next one. That was his last home game of the season. He never said he was disappointed. That almost made it worse. He just nodded and said, "It's okay, Dad," and life moved on. That's how it happens. No explosions, no dramatic music, just small absences stacking quietly over decades. You don't notice the weight of regret while you're busy. You feel it when you finally slow down. The illusion of time is powerful because it partners with ambition. It convinces you that sacrificing the present is noble, that missing birthdays, sunsets, and ordinary Tuesday dinners is the price of becoming someone. But here's what no one explains. Becoming someone often means disappearing from the moments that actually define you. I postponed joy like it was a reward I had to earn. I treated rest like a weakness. I told myself I would travel after retirement, reconnect after the big project, breathe after the next milestone. Retirement came. The house was paid off. The calendar finally cleared, and by then, my knees hurt. My energy was thin, and some of the people I meant to call were already gone. Time doesn't steal your life in dramatic ways. It waits for you to hand it over willingly. One reasonable decision at a time, and I handed it over with pride. I didn't become a stranger to my own life overnight. It happened slowly, politely. The way dust settles on a bookshelf you walk past every day but never really see. In my 40s, I was efficient. That's the word people used. Reliable, focused, disciplined. I wore those labels like medals. My schedule was tight, color-coded, optimized down to 15-minute blocks. I knew quarterly targets, interest rates, and how many years were left on the mortgage. But I couldn't tell you the last time I sat still without feeling guilty. That's how autopilot works. It rewards you. Promotions, rises, compliments about your work ethic. And so you keep going. You wake up at 6 a.m. Grab coffee from the same drive-thru. Merge onto the same freeway. Listen to the same news about markets and politics. And promise yourself that this pace is temporary. Just for now. You say, "I'll slow down later." But just for now quietly becomes your personality. There was a Sunday afternoon, I must have been around 62, when I found myself sitting in my own living room, in a recliner I barely used. The house was quiet. My wife was visiting her sister in Arizona. The kids had families of their own by then. I remember looking around and thinking, when did this become my life? The furniture was mine. The photographs on the wall were mine. But the years those photos represented felt like they belonged to someone else. I had been present for all of it, technically. I paid the bills. I attended the graduations. I stood in the family photos. But emotionally, I was always half somewhere else. Half thinking about Monday. Half worrying about the next quarter. half preparing for a future that never actually arrived. You can be physically present and still be absent from your own story. I learned that too late. Autopilot life doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like responsibility. That's why so many of us fall into it. We confuse motion with meaning. We confuse productivity with purpose. And because society applauds busy people, no one stops you. No one shakes you and says, "You're missing it." The truth is harder to admit. I wasn't trapped. I was praised. I wasn't forced. I was applauded. And every round of applause pulled me further away from the quiet. Ordinary moments that were actually my life, happening in real time. One day you look in the mirror and realize you built a life you can afford, but not one you fully lived. And that realization is colder than any hospital room. When you're young, you think the big moments are what define a life. The promotions, the weddings, the retirement party with sheet cake and polite applause. You circle those days on your calendar like they're the real story. Everything else feels like filler, background noise. But lying here at 94, I can tell you something that unsettles me more than death itself. The big moments aren't what come back to you at the end. It's the ordinary Tuesdays. I don't replay the day I closed my largest deal. I don't relive the applause at my retirement dinner. What comes back are the small things I barely noticed at the time. The way my daughter used to sit on the kitchen counter swinging her legs while I skimmed the newspaper. The smell of charcoal in the backyard during a 4th of July barbecue. The quiet hum of the dishwasher after everyone had gone to bed. And here's the part that hurts. I was there for most of it. But I wasn't fully there. My body was in the room. My mind was calculating deadlines. Payments. The next step. I treated those small moments like background music to a life that hadn't started yet. I thought the real living was still ahead of me. That's the trap. We think meaning is loud. We think it announces itself. We think it looks like a milestone or a trophy or a number in a bank account. But meaning is almost always quiet. It hides in repetition, in routine, in the way your wife reaches for your hand in the car without looking, in the way your son glances at you in the bleachers, checking if you're watching. I thought those moments would always be there. I assumed I could step into them later. When work slowed down, when stress eased, when I felt more established. But life doesn't archive moments for you. It doesn't keep them warm until you're ready. They pass. And once they pass, they don't repeat in the same way. There was a night, I can see it clearly now, when my wife asked if I wanted to sit outside and watch the sunset. I said I had emails to finish. It was a normal evening. Nothing dramatic. The sky probably turned shades of orange and pink over our half-acre yard. I don't remember. What I remember is that she stopped asking after a while. The moments you think don't matter are quietly deciding what your life will feel like at the end, and you don't realize their value until they're no longer available. I spent most of my adult life chasing what I believed was success. Not because I was greedy, not because I was heartless, but because I genuinely thought that if I could just reach a certain number, a certain title, a certain level of stability, then everything would finally settle inside me. That's what we're told. aren't we? Work hard now so you can relax later. Sacrifice now so you can enjoy later. Grind now so you can feel secure later. The American dream has a powerful script, and I followed it line by line. Bigger house, better neighborhood, college funds fully loaded, retirement portfolio diversified. I hit every benchmark I was supposed to hit, and every time I reached one, the satisfaction lasted about as long as a summer rainstorm. Brief, cool, gone by morning. I remember the day I paid off the mortgage. 30 years of payments. I thought I would feel triumphant, free. Instead, I stood in the kitchen holding the final statement, and all I felt was quiet, not peace, not joy, just quiet. The next day, I went back to work like nothing had changed, because nothing inside me had. Success doesn't automatically translate into fulfillment. That's the part no one explains when you're climbing. From the outside, my life looked solid, stable, respectable, but internally, I was always bracing for the next goalpost to move. I told myself, once I hit this next milestone, I'll finally breathe. But the milestone would come, and my mind would already be scanning the horizon for the next one. It's a dangerous treadmill. You think you're moving towards something meaningful, but you're mostly just moving, and the motion itself becomes addictive. The praise, the validation, the identity of being the responsible one. It feels good until the room gets quiet, until the career winds down, until the applause fades and you're left alone with yourself. When I retired at 67, people congratulated me. They shook my hand. They said I had built an admirable life. I smiled for the photos. But that first Monday morning without a schedule, I woke up at 6 a.m. Anyway, my body didn't know how to rest. My mind didn't know how to be still. And that's when it hit me. I had spent decades building a life designed around achievement, not presence. Around stability, not aliveness. I had achieved everything I planned, except the feeling I thought it would give me. One day, it sounds harmless, almost hopeful. One day I'll take the trip. One day I'll learn the guitar. One day I'll apologize. One day I'll slow down. One day I'll really start living. I built my entire emotional life around that phrase. It became a quiet promise I kept making to myself and quietly breaking. In my early 60s, my wife suggested we drive up the California coast, just the two of us, rent a small place near the ocean for a week, watch the waves roll in. No schedule, no conference calls, just time. I told her it sounded perfect. I told her we deserved it. I told her we would do it soon. We never did. There was always a reason to postpone it. The market was unstable. A client needed attention. The grandkids had school events. The roof needed repairs. And each reason felt responsible, logical, mature. That's the deception of one day. It disguises itself as practicality. Then came the doctor's appointment. Nothing dramatic at first. Just a few tests, a few follow-ups. The word aggressive entered the conversation. Suddenly, time wasn't a vague concept anymore. It was measured in treatment cycles and probabilities. Weeks, months. And do you know what haunted me in those quiet hospital waiting rooms? Not the missed promotions, not the financial risks I avoided. It was the coastline we never drove, the sunsets we postponed, the ordinary mornings we rushed through because we assumed they would repeat forever. You think you're postponing experiences. What you're really postponing is being alive inside them. We assume we have decades. We speak about next year like it's guaranteed. But life doesn't consult your calendar. It doesn't check whether you've crossed off your bucket list. It simply moves forward, relentless. By the time I finally had free time, my body was tired. My energy was thinner. Travel felt heavier. Even joy required more effort than it once did. The window for certain kinds of aliveness had quietly narrowed while I was busy being responsible. One day became, if only. And if only is a heavy phrase to carry into your 90s. If you keep waiting for the perfect moment to live, you may wake up and realize the moment already passed you by. I learned that lesson sitting in a hospital chair, staring at a future that suddenly felt very short. When you reach the edge of your life, something strange happens. The things you once protected at all costs start to look negotiable, and the things you once treated as optional start to look priceless. I used to guard my time like it was currency. I would say no to long dinners because I had an early meeting. I would cut conversations short because there was something important waiting on my desk. I believed I was being disciplined, strategic, focused. Now, lying here at 94, I would trade every disciplined decision for one more unhurried evening at the kitchen table. I would trade the promotions for one more baseball game in the bleachers. I would trade the larger house for one more slow Sunday morning with nowhere to be. I would trade the perfectly funded retirement account for one more chance to sit beside my wife and watch the sky turn orange without checking the time. Money can buy comfort. It can buy convenience. It can buy options. But it cannot buy back a missed moment. It cannot rewind a conversation you rushed through. It cannot recreate the exact way your child's voice sounded at 14 years old, or the way your wife laughed before life got heavier. We spend decades negotiating for financial security, and almost no time negotiating for presence. We insure our homes, our cars, our health, but we don't protect our attention. We let it scatter. We let it fragment. We hand it over to screens, to stress, to endless scrolling, to the illusion that productivity equals purpose. And here's the painful truth. When everything quiets down at the end, presence is the only currency that still holds value. Not the square footage, not the job title, not the balance in your 401, just the memory of whether you were really there. I don't remember every detail of my career. Those years blur together. But I remember clearly the few times I slowed down enough to actually feel my life. A spontaneous road trip, A night of laughter that lasted past midnight. A walk through fallen leaves when the air was cold enough to sting my lungs. Those memories are vivid because I was awake inside them. If I could give you anything from this hospital bed, it wouldn't be advice about investing or planning. It would be permission. Permission to stop postponing being alive. Because in the end, that's all that matters.